There are many reasons to be skeptical of Google Stadia and the seeming incoming rise of live-streamed video games. And one of the chief concerns relates to the concept of game ownership. The mainstream game industry has fought the concept of game ownership for decades. Everything from shady terms of service, to the concept of the online pass, to DRM, to games that require proprietary services to work. So-called AAA game publishers have long sought to assert their dominance over a video game beyond the point of sale. But as we've seen, when certain game servers shut down, when certain DRM stops working, when a publisher gets bored of asserting its dominance over a certain game, when it decides it's time to move on, the game in question becomes a bill of goods, sometimes completely unusable. This is a long-running concern of people who can think more than one financial quarter ahead. Game publishers in general do not think that far ahead, so they'll put in whatever DRM they want now, whatever online requirements they want now, and they don't really give a stuff about what happens in the future. Not their circus, not their monkeys. They'll do whatever benefits them short term and damn any long-term consequences. When you couple what we've already experienced from the game industry with Google, which is a wholly untrustworthy corporate entity on its own, there is significant room for concern, and Google's attempts to assuage that concern are completely unconvincing. Gaining traction at the moment is a Q&A session that was held on Reddit last week, where Google Stadia's product director, Andrei Doronichev, answered questions about what would happen to people's purchased video games in the event of Google Stadia shutting down. And when I say answered, I'm using a very charitable definition of the term, because the response is patronizing, sort of intellectually insulting, and doesn't really answer the question at all. And it's a fair question. Stadia will be streaming video games into people's houses. Google assures us that when we purchase one of these games, the game is ours, but we are completely relying on Google to provide access to that game. So if Google does get bored of Stadia, wanders off, if it doesn't work out for them, what on earth will happen to the games people have bought? Will people get refunded? Will there be some way to download that game after? Well, here is what Doronichev had to say. And if you have a sensitivity, a natural understandable sensitivity to toothless corporate bollocks speak, strap yourselves in. We get this a lot. I hear you. Moving to the cloud is scary. I felt the same way when music was transitioning from files to streaming. I still have all my old CDs in the garage, although it's hard to find a CD player these days, smiley face. The same happened to movies and photos and my docs and other files, and it's great. Games are no different. Eventually all our games will be safely in the cloud too, and we'll feel great about it. We've been investing a ton in tech, infrastructure and partnerships over the past few years. Nothing in life is certain, but we're committed to making Stadia a success. The games you buy on Stadia are yours to play. From day one, we'll support takeout so that you can download your game metadata, including saves if you want to. Of course, it's okay to doubt my words. There's nothing I can say now to make you believe if you don't, but what we can do is to launch the service and continue investing in it for years to come, exactly how we've been doing with Gmail, docs, music, movies, and photos. That's exactly what we're committed to. Alright, I'll tell you where you went wrong there, Andre. And it's not just that you spoke to people like they're 4 years bloody old. You've tried to establish confidence in Google by pointing to Google's track record of supporting Google's products and platforms. And while you have pointed at products and platforms that Google supported for years, you conveniently left out the dozens and dozens and dozens, almost 200 products and platforms that you've completely abandoned. In the wake of this, doing the rounds is a website called killedbygoogle.com, which serves as a sort of cemetery for products and services that Google has abandoned and left to die. There are 171 deaths listed, including 14 apps, 143 services, and 14 pieces of hardware. Google wants to instill faith in Stadia by pointing to its track record of support, but if we were to actually look at its track record of support, It ain't great. Google's whole business model is trying to invade every single aspect of modern life. And it does this by pumping out service after service, app after app, machine after machine. They basically throw as much crap at the wall as possible to see what sticks, and anything that doesn't stick gets thrown in the bin. With that in mind, what Stadia's product director said holds absolutely no merit. The only way Google will support Stadia for many years to come is if Google Stadia is a big enough success. If it isn't, well, it will go straight into the bin alongside Google Hangouts, Google Jump, Google Cloud Messaging, Google Trips, Google Reader, Google URL Shortener, Google Allo, Inbox by Gmail, YouTube Gaming, Google News and Weather, Google Goggles, Encrypted Search, Tears, etc, etc, etc. And more to the point, nothing Google Stadia's product director said answers the actual question. The hell happens to our libraries if Google Stadia ends up killed by Google? And I've been thinking about that, and I came to the conclusion that even if Google has a plan in place, which I'm not entirely convinced it does, I don't think it's ever thought that far ahead, but even if it does have a plan in place to protect people's libraries in the event of Stadia's death, it's not like Google could actually tell us right now, not with potentially undermining the entire point of Stadia, because the entire point of Google Stadia is cloud-based gaming. No physical copies, no downloads. Direct from Google to your home. Anything they say about securing the game via downloads or anything would completely miss the point of Stadia. And some people would surely ask, well, if you've got a plan to let us download our games for safekeeping, why don't you just do that now? And Google can't do that now because then it just becomes a game console. Any plan that Google could have to safeguard people's libraries is something that would have people asking, well, why isn't that just a standard part of the machine? But ironically, the more safeguards Stadia would get, the more functionality Stadia would get, the less of a selling point its central gimmick becomes. Of course, this is all based on the hypothetical idea that Google has thought far enough ahead about this, but that isn't really part of Google's business model to think ahead. That doesn't seem to be the priority of any corporation at this point. So Google won't assure you that your libraries are secure. Google can't assure you that your libraries are secure. All they have in their pocket is exactly what Doronichev said. Just trust us. That's all it is. That's the best they've got. They simply want us to take it on faith that if we spend money on Google Stadia, then the things we buy will remain ours. And in the process, we also have to trust any company that puts its games on Google Stadia. So imagine that. Like, say if Activision puts a game on there, and Activision CEO Bobby Kotick is already pretty interested, we have to trust Google and Activision. Google and Activision. Harold Shipman and John Wayne Gacy. What could go wrong? I, along with many others, have expressed major distrust for Google Stadia. I already had no desire to spend money on the idea of a video game. Not if I'm expected to pay for them individually, at full price, when I could buy the same game on another system and have a reasonable expectation that I could keep that game secure on my end. And that bit is what's really sticking in the neck here, this idea that we still have to individually purchase these games like we already do, alongside all the other monetization options that publishers put in to keep you spending on these games. It seems lately that everything coming out about Stadia makes it look less and less spectacular, and the only thing Google has in its pocket is this unconvincing notion that we should just trust them. And somehow I don't think talking down to people like they're children is going to bring us any closer to that. And while some sort of subscription service will be available, we do not yet have enough details to know how exactly worth it that's gonna be and what exactly we'll get our hands on. I'm not disinterested in the idea of live stream gaming, but the way the so-called AAA game industry wants to do it, the way Google Stadia wants to do it, I'm sorry, but the trust just isn't there. And anyone who is going to invest in a Stadia and in the library that the Stadia boasts is just going to have to cross their fingers and hope that enough people are doing the same to continue Google's investment. And, well, good luck with that.